Well, last week I told you about my family's love for Christmas movies. Well, when I got home, I got in trouble because I forgot some, Everybody has their lists, and so my boys were getting on to me. They let me know, I left off Elf. We watched that last night. Jumping on the Christmas tree, Buddy the Elf, my favorite. What's your favorite color? The Santa Claus. I love that one. Tim Allen. Any Tim Allen fans? I mean, come on. Home Improvement, let's go. But the one that they really hit me on was Charlie Brown Christmas. Any Charlie Brown Christmas fans? Love it, We start off the Christmas season with this one almost every single year. And if you've watched the movie, if you haven't, it's over 50 years old. So I was going to go home and watch that today. It's like, no, you've missed it, I'm not spoiling anything. If you watched it, let me remind you what you've watched, and if you haven't, maybe this will spur you to go watch it. Charlie Brown is driven by a sense of restlessness that he has throughout the entire special, all right? As he's working through this Christmas season, but he's just not feeling the joy of it. He's looking for it, he's searching for it, but he just simply can't put his finger on it. He does everything that he possibly can to try to produce this joy inside of him. He goes and seeks out counsel from Lucy, which is just comical, right? Going and seeking out, laying down on bed, trying to listen from another child of what you should do to find joy. He does the thing that you're supposed to do. He goes and picks out the tree, He identifies the tree. He takes on the big responsibility of putting on the Christmas pageant, he's the one that's going to direct this thing. He tries so many different things to stir up the Christmas joy inside of him, but nothing just seems to work. Well, that kind of restlessness, this ache or this longing that's kind of beneath the surface is right at the center of what we find in Ruth chapter 3. The chapter opens with Naomi and Ruth, and they're just unsettled. And then you work through the entirety of the story, and then you end with Boaz, who also ends unsettled. There's this sense of restlessness that you see from beginning to end throughout this entire chapter. I mean, you see it in the very book in verses as well. Naomi opens by asking, "My daughter, shouldn't I find rest for you?" Very first question, very first statement in the entire chapter. And their lives are marked by this sense of lack of rest. I mean, they're in Bethlehem, but they don't have a home yet. I mean, they're provided for, but they're not really stable back in Bethlehem yet. They are safe momentarily, but they haven't really found a security or a place that they can truly rest yet. And by the end of the chapter, you kind of see that Boaz has adopted this sense of restlessness as well. Here's what Naomi says about him in verse 18, literally the last part of the entire book, of the chapter. "My daughter, he won't rest unless he resolves this today," this tension that we're going to see throughout the entire chapter. I mean, the whole chapter is marked by a sense of restlessness. And so Ruth 3 is really a story about this movement from restlessness to redemption. A sense of restlessness that maybe all of us came in with this morning in this move to redemption. And the chapter kind of begs this question by the end of it. It's not the question of, are you restless? Because the reality is we're all human. We have this sense of restlessness inside of us. The question is, what are you doing with your restlessness? Where are you going with it? What are you doing with it? The thing that we all feel and experience, where are you turning in order to find that inner rest and peace that you and I both need? And when restlessness sets in, we have a variety of ways that we respond to this. What we're going to find is one of those ways is that we seem to try to take control. We try to manipulate circumstances, or we try to make things happen. You try to take control when things just don't seem to be moving along. At other times, we see people that are great models for us of faith and integrity, and we see that in this chapter as well. And so my prayer this morning is that as we work through this the three movements of this chapter, that we would see the fruitlessness of trying to take control. It's really a fruitless act. I mean, what actually ends up happening is you're left pretty empty. I would love for us to be able to just really dispel the idea that we can actually manufacture something that's worthwhile and then leave with this trust and this faith that God truly is the one that works out provision in our life. That's what we're going to see for Ruth and Naomi, and I want us to feel that as well. So we see the fruitlessness of trying to take control in the first movement of this chapter, in chapter 3, and it's really the deceptive scheme that Naomi is trying to orchestrate that Cherish just read for us. So she comes to Ruth presenting a plan. What's happened here is it's been about 7 weeks since the last interaction between Boaz and Ruth. Guys, right, ladies? You know? What has happened is the time between a harvest and a threshing is about 6 to 7 weeks. And so we went from the harvest and now we're at this threshing moment. And Naomi really wants Ruth to remarry. Because Ruth gave up everything, didn't she? I mean, for her to follow Naomi, she left her family, she left her home, she left her land. She literally gave up everything to go to a place and a people that she did not know. I mean, she sacrifices everything. And so Naomi longs to see Ruth remarry, and Naomi is tired of waiting. And when waiting feels unproductive, we're tempted to take control. And that's what we see in the plan or the scheme that Naomi gives to Ruth. Here's what she tells her to do. She tells her to go take a shower, which if you're trying to seek out somebody that you're interested in, it's a pretty good place to start, you know. What happens for Ruth is the last time that she saw Boaz, I mean, she has dirt underneath her fingernails because she's going and she's gleaning. And so she's like, go take a shower. And then she tells her to put on perfume. Good next step. Dress to impress. And then things start to go a little off the rails. She tells Ruth to go down to the threshing floor at night to be able to go see Boaz again. And then after he has eaten and drinking and then laid down to sleep, she's to go to the foot of his bed, uncover his feet, which is a really risky and vulnerable place to put yourself, as well as it can communicate some rather wrong intentions. I mean, she almost seems like a prostitute going to the threshing floor. Now, I'm a father of 4 boys. I don't have a girl in my home, so I can't say that I know how to necessarily parent a daughter along, but I know enough about parenting that this isn't it, you know? This isn't how you say and coach your daughter about how you go instigate somebody that you're interested in. Nonetheless, Ruth agrees, and she says in verse 5, I will do everything you say. Naomi's plan here is pretty deceptive. Rather than trusting God to move Boaz to action, Naomi is seeking this shortcut through manipulation and seduction. It's strategic, but it's not really trusting. And so Naomi, as you think back on all of her story of what's happened throughout Ruth, she should really know better, shouldn't she? If you look, she was a schemer. I mean, if you think about her and her husband in chapter 1, what are they doing? There's famine that comes upon the land. And what do? They leave and they skirt God's commandments and they go to Moab, the place that he's told them not to go. And they set up for a decade there trying to provide for their family. They're scheming and looking to the things of this world for the result and the outcomes that they really want. And it leaves them empty. And then if you think about how things have moved forward, when she does act in faith and obedience, it's not really she's being strategic. When she comes back to Bethlehem, it's not because she had orchestrated that the right and perfect time was for her to come at the barley harvest. This was God's timing. I mean, she even tried to coerce her own daughter-in-law to go back to Moab, but now we see that's working out a lot better for her than she ever dreamt or imagined. Like everything that she has done scheming-wise has left her empty, and anything that she's done that has actually worked towards her benefit was no strategy of hers whatsoever. She should have seen that this was the work of the Lord of what was happening here, and instead of patiently waiting for God to bring the details together, she thinks that God's going to miss his opportunity and steps in. She's being deceptive. She's using Boaz and his kindness in the place that she knows he's going to be and the things that take place at their threshing floor in order to try to place Ruth in an opportune moment for her to manipulate and seduce Boaz so that they can get the protection and security that they need. There's a lesson here for us. If we're honest, just as many of our mistakes in life come from us trying to take control as much as our rebellion maybe against God in this life. If you think about it, the restlessness that we have often looks like some of the schemes that Naomi puts forth here. When we do something outside of trusting in the Lord and his bringing those details together, whether it's like the text message that you like type up and then delete and then restate and then think about it and then like you schedule the timing at 8:01 so it doesn't look like it comes at 8 o'clock, it comes at 8:01. Anybody? Just me? Okay, thank you. 3 of us that are in here are honest. Like, man, whenever we're thinking through all the ways that we can kind of try to work and orchestrate the details behind the scenes to where our name can't be attached to it, but we're moving the outcomes along in the way that would actually advantage us. Look, we're participating in similar schemes. It may not end with like this idea of seduction, but we have the same ideas in our outcomes, don't we? We participate in these same kind of things. When we do this, we're communicating something about our belief in God. When we are working at these schemes, we're saying that God is unaware, or that God is unwilling, or that God is too slow, and that honestly, he just needs our help. Inevitably, it leads to decisions that we regret. As we're coming in this morning and you're like thinking about all that we're going to be doing here, I mean, we're in the midst of the Christmas season. We're at the end of the year. We're thinking towards next year as well. You may be coming in with a sense of restlessness. I think it's probably more likely that you're coming in with restlessness rather than feeling really at peace and at rest in the places that you are in your life. I mean, it may be similar to what Ruth and Naomi are dealing with, that you're like really longing to find a spouse or a partner in this life and you're feeling really restless about it. Some of you, maybe it feels like your future, your career, your school is really up in arms and you don't know the direction that it's headed and it has you feeling this sense of restlessness. Maybe for some of us in here, it's like our kids aren't where we want them to be. And you want to work things out behind the scenes. You're feeling restless and you want to take control. Here's the question that I think we're supposed to feel after these first 5 verses. As we place ourselves in Naomi's shoes, we're supposed to ask the question, am I presently scheming? Am I trying to orchestrate details behind the scenes much like Naomi is here? Is this what's going on inside of me? Here's a few questions or prompts for you as you're thinking through this morning. Here's 3 ways that you might be, that are like a Ruth test maybe, or a Naomi test for you. You may be trying to scheme. 1, if you're acting in desperation. If you're like, there seems to be no other possible solutions for me but then to take this knee-jerk reaction. Look, you might be kind of dealing with this idea of scheming. You're not necessarily trusting that God's going to bring about the details in your life as we see it happen with Naomi and Ruth here, and you're trying to jump at the first opportunity. Acting in desperation might be a sign that you're scheming. The second one is that you're trying to manage the outcomes. You are kind of the puppet master behind the scene. you know? You're the one that's trying to orchestrate the details of what's going on, whether it be at work or in your home, so you can see the outcomes play out the way that you want to. You might be scheming. The last one is you may be willing to make some decisions that compromise your character. I can maybe work this or I could tweak it, or I can manipulate the situation to where it looks more like an excuse than really a mark on my own character, but you know what you're doing, you know? If this may be where you're at, you may be scheming this morning. We're supposed to place ourselves in the shoes of Naomi here and ask ourselves that question. But what we need to see is that our shortcuts inevitably lead to things that we will regret later in life. Naomi would say that to us as well. God is worthy of your trust. You can trust him with the details. As we see him working through Ruth, we can trust that he's doing it with us as well. We see this tangibly through Ruth in the next section. Here's what verses 6 through 13 say. She went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law had charged her to do. And after Boaz ate and drank and was in good spirits, he went to lie down at the end of the pile of barley, and she came secretly, uncovered his feet, and laid down. So why they stayed at the threshing floor is because they would go down. The threshing floor was a place that was elevated, and so you'd bring your harvest and you would place it, and then you would beat it or you would trample on it so that the chaff and the actual sustenance would stick around. The chaff, you'd throw it up and it would float away, and then the sustenance would drop back down. And after you're done, you would put it all into a pile, and it was usually dark at night because the wind is at its highest at night. And so they would do it at night. They would get their pile of barley and they would sleep there to protect it. That's why he's staying there. This isn't like a dude's camp out. It's like he's trying to protect his food. So, verse 8, at midnight, Boaz was startled, turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. He's like shocked by this. This is a place not for women, but for men. Not because women couldn't do the job, but because of just the culture of the place. So he asked, "Who are you?" "I am Ruth, your servant," she replied. "Take me under your wing, for you are a family redeemer." Now, mark in your mind how this is different from what Naomi tells her to go do. We'll talk about it here in a second. Verse 10. Then he said, "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. You have shown more kindness now than before because you have not pursued younger men, whether rich or poor." This is kind of the background to why he hasn't talked to her in 6 to 7 weeks. All right, so ladies, there's some reason Boaz is not like a jerk. Verse 11, "Now, don't be afraid, my daughter. I'll do for you whatever you say, since all the people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Yes, it is true that I'm a family redeemer, but there's a redeemer closer than I am. Stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, that's good, let him redeem you. But if he doesn't want to redeem you, as the Lord lives, I will. Now lie down until morning." So Ruth follows Naomi's instructions, but only up to a point, right? Rather than attempting to seduce a relationship with Boaz, Ruth steps out with integrity. She gives this honest appeal to Boaz where she says, "Take me under your care, for you are a family redeemer." What Ruth is appealing for is called levirate redemption, all right? This is an Old Testament provision that's designed to protect widows and the marginalized and to preserve family lines. So what would happen is when a married man would pass away, the person that's closest to him, the closest male in his family, could then take his wife and preserve his family line as well as his inheritance throughout all of the nation of Israel. And this would preserve not just the deceased man, but like the people that were underneath his care. And this was one of God's ways of showing that he just really cared. That like whenever things happened in life, they had a system and they had a process for how the people of Israel could be cared for, even down to some of the most marginalized people in the entire society. It's in a way of expressing God's genuine care for his people. And so Ruth has learned God's law. being a Moabitess, she knows that this is something that God has set up for his own people. It's not a practice that she had back in her own land, but as she's come and she's learned from Naomi and she's been in the nation of Israel, she's learned God's law, and so she's learned this practice. And so she makes an honest appeal to it, and she does it really beautifully. As she does it, she actually borrows Boaz's words to her in chapter 2. In chapter 2, Boaz prays over Ruth with her loyalty that she's shown to Naomi, that God would be a refuge to her and take her under his wings. Now Ruth appeals to Boaz and says, "Take me under your wing." She's making an appeal using his words. Basically what she's saying is, be the answer to the prayer that you prayed in chapter 2. And so Ruth's appeal here is rooted in Scripture, and because it's rooted in Scripture, and it actually takes Boaz in his integrity and in his character, is honoring to both God and Boaz. In order of seeking to manipulate and use seduction in order to bring about her own desires and her own plans, she actually honors God, and she actually honors Boaz by the way that she appeals to both of them. As I was reading about this, there's a story from Alexander the Great that I've had stored away for a really long time that it actually I think kind of teases out for this for us of what it looks like and how this is actually honoring to both God and Boaz. So Alexander the Great, kind of an awful dude, but he had a lot of generals, and there was this one general that had served Alexander the Great for his entire life. And so his daughter was set to get married. And so this general comes to Alexander the Great asking that he would pay for his daughter's wedding. And so he's like, this guy has served me for so long, so faithfully. Yes, absolutely. He tells him to go talk to his treasurer. And so he goes to the treasurer, the general goes to the treasurer, asks that for this enormous amount of money. An amount of money that the treasurer has never seen anybody spend on a wedding before. And so the treasurer has to go report this back to Alexander the Great. And so he rushes back to Alexander the Great. And as he goes to Alexander the Great, he's expecting this explosion to happen. How in the world could he ask for so much money? But instead, what the treasurer noticed is that Alexander the Great actually smiled and he said, give it to him. And the treasurer is like, why? There's no need for this amount of money in order to be spent on a wedding. He's taking advantage of you, Alexander the Great. And here's why Alexander the Great says yes. He says, by coming to me and asking me for such a large sum for a wedding, he honors me because he acknowledges not only am I rich, but I'm also generous. That's what Ruth is doing here. Ruth's request honors Boaz because it assumes the best of him. That he's a person of integrity, that he's a person of wealth, and that those two come together in his life, not in order just to benefit himself, but to benefit the people underneath him. He views these things as a resource that God has given him in order to embetter other people. Ruth comes and makes this appeal to him, not trying to seduce or manipulate, but because she honors him. In the same way, she also honors God because she's functioning in faith. He could have said no. There's a Redeemer that's ahead of him. And Ruth doesn't go to the next kinsman redeemer that could actually do what God's law says. She comes to Boaz. She's functioning in faith. She's seeing the way that God has been at work behind the details, and she's coming to the man that has shown tremendous kindness to her, and she acknowledges that this is God's hand at work, hidden hand at work in the details of my life. And when she comes and brings this appeal to Boaz, she's honoring God as well because she's functioning in faith that God's going to bring the details together. This is an honoring appeal that Ruth makes both to God and to Boaz. Look, this is the way. If I could steal from the Mandalorian, this is the way. Rather than scheming and trying to take matters into our own hands, functioning and moving forward with faith and integrity is always the best way. Trying to manipulate outcomes will always fall short instead of making honest appeals. Controlling people always falls short of trusting God and moving forward in faith that He's going to provide. So here's a few questions for those of us that are feeling restless, all right? As we think about like our internal desires, our wants, sometimes we state our needs as wants or our wants as needs. If we're feeling this, if you're in this place that you feel like in a bit of a place of despair, your back is up against the wall, you're thinking through, what do I need to do? How do I move forward? Here's a few questions that might help you chart how to move forward and progress in faith and integrity. The first one is, am I speaking openly and plainly? That's what we see here with Ruth. Rather than functioning in the dark as she's been told to do by Naomi, what Ruth does is she functions with openness and plainness with Boaz. Look, if you are trying to function in secrecy, you might be working in manipulation. That's not functioning with faith or integrity. Are you functioning or speaking with openness and plainness? The second one, does this honor God and the person involved? Integrity seeks mutual dignity, not personal advantage. When we're in this situation, how am I honoring God with my actions as well as the person that's sitting in front of me? Or am I trying to manipulate things to where maybe I could make it an argument that it advantages God, but it certainly advantages me, and it's at the expense of the person that's sitting across from me. When we move forward in integrity, it takes all honor for all parties involved. And the last one, am I trusting God with the outcome or am I trying to control it? Ruth chooses to trust and acts with integrity. And we're going to see all this kind of come to fruition in verses 14 through 18. Here's what it says. So she laid down at his feet until morning, but got up while it was still dark. Then Boaz said, "Don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." And he told Ruth, "Bring the shawl you're wearing and hold it out." And when she held it out, he shoveled 6 measures of barley into her shawl, and she went into the town. She went to her mother-in-law, Naomi, who asked her, "What happened, my daughter?" And then Ruth told her everything the man had done for her. She said, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley because he said, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" And Naomi said, "My daughter, wait until you find out how things go, for he won't rest until he resolves this today." What we see here is that God faithfully provides for Ruth and Naomi, doesn't he? Her appeal to Boaz has been received. Her needs have been met. Her reputation is protected. God has faithfully provided for Ruth as she's functioned in faith and integrity. Now, here's what I want you to notice, all right? So we pointed out at the very beginning that the chapter ends with, "He won't rest unless he resolves this today." We identified that there's restlessness throughout this entire chapter, but what we need to see is that there's a striking difference between Naomi's restlessness and Boaz's restlessness. Have you seen it? I mean, what happens here is that Boaz's restlessness looks like an act in the light. I mean, he's not trying to do anything behind the dark. He's trying to do things with honor and integrity. He identifies that there's a very clear process. He identifies that there's somebody ahead of him. He identifies that he's going to go work this out in the very next day. Ruth chapter 4, what we're going to find is that he's doing this very publicly. He goes to one of the most public places that he can try to tease out this whole narrative that you could possibly find in Bethlehem. He does this in the light while Naomi is scheming in the dark. At night, go to the threshing floor, have a covering, undress his feet, see what he tells you to do. Strikingly different. The difference is where their hope lies. When you look at Naomi and you see her history as well as the way that she functions here, her hope lies in man and the things of this world. When famine strikes, she flees. When back is up against the wall, she's trying to manipulate the man that has the resources to actually make a change. Her hope lies in the things of this world, where Boaz is strikingly different. Boaz is functioning in the light. He's trusting that God has given him the resources that he has. He uses them to the benefit of other people, and he knows that he needs to go and do things the right way, trusting that God's actually going to bring it to fruition. Boaz possesses this fear of God that makes him move forward with integrity and generosity. That special, the Charlie Brown Christmas special that the boys gave me such a hard time about last week, I think identifies the shift of focus that we see between Naomi and Boaz really well at the very end of the special. It ends with that Christmas pageant that Charlie Brown has worked so hard to kind of orchestrate. What happens, and you all know this, right? Linus gets up. What does he come? He comes onto the stage, and then he recites Luke chapter 2, which is the birth narrative of Jesus. And Linus, he's famous for one thing. And what is it? Talk to me. His blanket. He's famous for his security blanket. Throughout all of the Peanuts story, what you find with Linus and all of his story is that people are constantly trying to get him to drop the blanket. And it never works until this moment. At this moment, Linus drops the blanket with simplicity, and it's not an accident. If you've watched the scene, what happens is Linus drops his security blanket at the moment that he utters, "Fear not," as he's reciting Luke chapter 2. You see that progression up there? He takes it up on the stage. He has it with him. He's reciting Luke chapter 2, and at the moment that he addresses these words, the blanket drops. What Charles Scholes is trying to communicate to you is that the birth of Jesus frees us from fear. Through this little character boy that has his security blanket wherever he goes, and everybody has tried to get him to drop it. It's not until this very moment that at the birth of Jesus that he finally lets it go, and he lets go of all the fear that goes along with the entanglement of him holding on to that little blanket. Look, Advent is the season that reminds us the promise of hope, doesn't it? Like, guys, think about this. There's nobody that should feel more hopeful than us. Because what happens in Advent is that God is fully aware. God is fully willing. That God is not too late. What happens is that God knows exactly what we need. God knows exactly the sin problem that we have and the Redeemer that we need in order for us to be liberated from the sin that so entangled us. God is so willing that he sends his own son to come in the form of human flesh in a very vulnerable and humble state of a little baby child who might grow up and live perfectly in this life the way that you and I cannot do, so that he can actually be the perfect sacrifice that you and I need in order to be freed from our sin. And then what we see with Jesus is that he's this Redeemer that's willing to actually go and lay down his life. And this happens at just the right time in human history. God's not too fast and he's not too slow. At the perfect time in human history, where there's this incredible opportunity for God's gospel to go forward throughout all of the world, for Jesus to lay down his life in a generation that would not receive him. All of this was done at the right time. Guys, if anybody should be hopeful, it is us. Because God has seen you, God has acted for you, and God is not too late, and he is functioning at just the right time. you should be filled with incredible hope. Look, the season of Advent tells us that we have no idea what God might do tomorrow. We have no idea how he might function for you and be orchestrating the details of your life for your good. The things that look so dark and look so bleak that are moving you towards scheming right now, tomorrow will look like idiocy. We need to be like Ruth and Boaz, who with integrity and faith trust that God is working out the details of our life and that we can actually function in obedience, trusting his commands, doing what he's told us to do throughout his scriptures, trusting and believing that he's going to orchestrate and bring the details together without your scheming. Man, may we drop the blanket. Amen? Can we drop the fear? Can we move forward day after day, putting one step before the other, trusting the good and glorious and big God that we believe in? Can we move forward with hope? Not wondering if things are going to work out, but moving forward knowing things will work out for us. Like Jesus, he came once, and the promise is he's coming again. You can move forward with hope. And here's the gift, that you have one another. We're not just moving forward in life with in isolation, just hoping and trying to preach to ourselves over and over again that things are going to work out. God's gifted you with his family. He's gifted you with the family of God to where now we get to speak this hope into one another's lives. So look, when our backs look like they're against the wall, that's when we step in. Your charge is to speak hope into your family's life. You have the hope of Christ. You have the gift of grace. You have the hope that Jesus is returning. Speak it into one another's lives. When you notice restlessness, speak truth into it. Model the way of integrity and faith. Guys, Advent is an incredible time for us to be fixated that we should not be scheming, but we should be clinging to all that we have in Jesus Christ, because what he has done in our past is a promise that he's going to bring it to fruition in our future. And we get the privilege of living in that tension. And he's gifted you with the Holy Spirit to help you live in the moment in the way that he's called and commanded you to do. The question that we have with Ruth chapter 3 is not, are you restless? But what are you doing with your restlessness? Naomi was scheming in the dark. Ruth and Boaz, they moved forward with integrity and faith. I want to be Ruth and Boaz. I want to have that movement from trusting in the things of this world to the almighty creator of this universe. And I want that moment in my life that I drop the blanket. And I want you to have that moment where you drop the blanket. Y'all, what is the fear that's keeping your hands on the blanket? And before you leave this place, we're about to take communion, we're about to spend time in corporate prayer with one another. In that time, would you please drop the blanket? Would you let go of the blanket? And you have Jesus who is here, who is good, who loves you, who's given up everything for you, and he's ready to cling. Would you press in? And then as you're praying together, as you're praying vulnerably and you're letting go of the blanket, would you press in as the church and the family of God? Would you press in, speak in, pray over as you need to? Guys, we don't have enough people that go to the back when we say that there's opportunities for prayer or for to make a decision in Jesus. Like, this is the moment. May we move forward in faith. You have too great of a God not to. Let's pray.